And one thing that can be very confusing, you know, when you come to Thailand is just obviously being a different culture and everything, you know, they just, if you're going up country, it can be really confusing, all the different customs and that, you know, like most people know that you're supposed to wire people, but you know, you're only really supposed to wire your equals and or your social superiors. And of course, if you don't really know anybody, how do you judge that? I mean, obviously age is one consideration. So I can remember the first few times I went up country, it was just really confusing. You know, am I supposed to wire this person? You know, are they supposed to wire me? And it was, you know, it was quite confusing. I think it was only after a few trips that I sort of realised that the best way of dealing with it is to accept that they know we're foreigners and they expect us to be strange. So, you know, the best thing to do is just act strange, you know, just act friendly. I mean, obviously white people, you know, family and people like that, but you know, you only need to do it once. And then I think really the best thing you can do is just relax and try to have a good time. You know, if you're doing that, if you're having a good time, they'll love you no matter what. You know, you'll get away with any kind of social faux pas if you just relax and have a good time. And I think that's the secret. That's the way to deal with it. One thing you'll notice is that Thais can be sort of very flexible with their description of people, you know, like they'll introduce somebody to you as their brother or their sister, and being Westerners, you know, we tend to kind of take those descriptions at face value, but you should never do that in Thailand. You know, like brother and sister is just as likely to be friend or maybe even acquaintance, you know. And you know, I've known some Thais for years thinking that they're really brothers and sisters, and then you find out they're not. So yeah, just don't take everything literally that they tell you, you know. And it can have a more sinister side, you know. I mean, you do hear stories of Farangs who kind of marry Thai women and then find out that, you know, their brother in the village is actually their real husband. You know, it does go on. So you know, you can yeah, you've got to keep an open mind as to their descriptions. You know, they're not always, things aren't always as they say they are. Another thing about Thais is they can just be they can be very unworldly. You know, they kind of like you know, they're brought up to love their country and you know, and they grow up believing it's a great country, which I agree with them, it is, but they can be so unworldly about things, you know, and sometimes it can you know, sometimes it can lead to things like discrimination. You know, when the current situation first developed, I went to my local gym, you know, this was within a week or so of the first lockdown, and there was a sign outside the gym that just said in English and in Thai, no foreigners allowed. You know, it was that blunt, and you know, I took it a bit personally because I'm the only sort of foreigner in town, you know. So I got in there and you know, I told them off, and they were, oh no Karl, no, it's not you, you know, like, you're a good foreigner, you know, you're all right, you can still come, it's them other foreigners. But you know, it's a bit like that, they're very unworldly, and so, you know, some of the ways they look at things, you know, it's definitely discrimination. Also, when you go to national parks, you know, they have a two-tier pricing system, and if you go somewhere popular like Khao Yai National Park, the locals are paying 40 baht and foreigners are paying 400, you know, and it's a significant difference. And you know, I've jumped through all kinds of hoops to get a kind of Thai ID card for foreigners, and you know, they won't even accept that, you know, and it's kind of frustrating that you go through all this effort to fit in and get this documentation, and you're still considered a foreigner. You know, you still don't get any, or you know, there's a lot of advantages from it that you don't get. And another way that I really fear for them with their unworldliness is, like, you know, it's a rapidly changing world now. You know, when you're talking about things like finance, mortgages, you know, like even the modern concept of buying houses, you know, like you buy a house or a condo, and then when you're bored of it or you grow out of it, you sell it. and you know, some people even buying for investment. This is all very new to Thai society. You know, the traditional way in Thailand was that, you know, you'd have the family plot, and when one of the sons and daughters got married, they'd get a plot of the land and they'd live on that. So, you know, this is all very new, and you know, all these banking institutions are coming in, and you know, and they've got all these ideas that they've had years, decades to hone and refine in the West are coming out, and you know, and you're getting people who are just kind of like, they're just not very worldly, so they don't think twice about taking out loans, you know. And there's a lot of people here who are kind of land rich, so they can, you know, they're kind of simple folk, and the bank will tell, well, yeah, you know, yeah, you can borrow money, you can just secure it on your land, you know. And they really, you know, it's kind of like, it's a sophisticated setup that they don't really fully understand, you know. So I fear that in the future, you know, you're going to get a lot of these Thais sort of borrowing money on the back of their land, and it's going to, you know, it's going to backfire, you know. You know, as I said before, you know, all these mechanisms coming in, they've been homed, you know. In the West, we've got things like credit rating systems, credit cards, and, you know, and I just think that Thais are kind of lambs to the slaughter, you know. A lot of them, you know, are just going to be, you know, if you're an insurance salesman or you know, or somebody of that ilk, I think it's very easy for you to kind of sit down with the Thai and say, yeah, no problem, you know, you can borrow this, you can secure it on that. And you know, we tend to be more worldly, and you know, we're used to the catches, the flip side of this kind of thing. Oh, hang about, you know, I can't do that because that's secured on my land, you know. Or, oh yeah, you know, I can repay that, I might not have any interest for the first year, but then after that it's going to be, you know, I'm going to end up paying a lot more, you know. So I really, you know, I think that there's a side to this unworldliness that is going to, you know, can backfire on them in the future. I think one thing I actually quite like about Thailand, you know, which kind of, you know, it might kind of seem contradictory to some of the things that I've already said, is the way that, you know, like PC culture hasn't turned the place into a madhouse yet, you know. It's I don't know, you know, they sort of still see men and women as having kind of like naturally having different drives and perhaps leaning towards different roles, and they just kind of accept that. I guess it's an individual choice how you view that, but you know, there's a side to it I quite like, you know. I think in the West these days there's a lot of confusion, you know, there's a lot of confusion from both men and women who are not really sort of sure what their role is or should be, and it's it can be quite refreshing when things like that, they just seem a lot clearer to the Thais than they currently do to most of us Westerners. I found that most Thais seem a lot clearer than us Westerners when it comes to the idea of justice and punishment. You know, like in the West we tend to see it in shades, you know. We sort of like, oh yeah, you know, like he's a bad person, but his crime wasn't that bad, you know, so like maybe this sentence is more fitting. Whereas most Thais, it's very black and white. Oh no, he's a bad man, you know, he's a bad woman, they go to prison, you know. Or even extent of the death penalty, you know, they're just sort of like, there are no grey areas, it's just they deserve it, and that's all there is to it. And of course, you know, that extends to the actual penal system, where you see, you know, like sentences for crimes that just seem really draconian to us Westerners, you know. Thais just kind of, oh yeah, he's bad, he go to prison now, you know. They're just that, it's just black and white, you know, that's the way they see it. I find that most Thais are a lot more accepting of kind of death and fate than we are, you know. It's just kind of like, they haven't got this big fear about it, you know. It's just like, oh yeah, and then you die, you know. It's kind of it's like that, you know, very kind of like fatalistic outlook. I can remember once, you know, I knew this Thai family, and there was somebody in the village who'd got drunk, and he'd been hit by a car and he died. And you know, I turned up in the village a few weeks later after this had happened, you know, and I didn't know whether to talk about it or not, if it was going to be a sore point. And we're sitting there chatting, and somebody brought it up. You know, they started talking about this guy who died, and they started telling this story, and they were laughing. They were saying, oh yeah, he got drunk and then he sat beside the road, and then this pickup truck come along and hit him, and bang, boom, and he went 15 foot in the air, and then he was dead. And they were laughing about it, and it kind of, you know, it just freaked me out. You know, you just kind of like, you expected everybody to be kind of solemn about it, but they were kind of fatalistic about it. You know, I guess it sort of goes with their thoughts that you're kind of reborn on another level. You know, they see it that way. Also, they believe in karma. You know, they call it gam. They just sort of really believe that, you know, that you know, what you put out is what you get back. You know, I think, you know, in that way they could teach us a lot, for sure. You know, I think that's the Buddhism side of their culture. Now, one thing I love about the Thais is they can be very sociable. You know, they'll just start talking to you anywhere. You know, if you're sitting on a train somewhere, they'll just start talking to you. You know, I've even had it at bus stops. You know, I've been waiting at bus stops, and, you know, an old lady didn't even cross her mind that I might not speak Thai, just started talking to me in Thai. You know, they're kind of like, they're very sociable. They'll sit down and share things and have a good chat. You know, there can be a negative flip side to that. The negative flip side is to sort of like Western tastes. You know, sometimes they can appear to be a bit nosy. You know, they'll take the conversation a bit further than most Westerners were. You know, for instance, like, they love asking you, you know, have you got children? You know, and in the West, you know, you'd probably ask somebody if they got any children, but if they said no, you'd leave it at that. But in Thailand, they're just as likely to say, why not? You know, like, why don't you have any children? You know, but yeah, overall, you know, I do see it as a really good quality. You know, how sociable they are. Now, in part one, I touched upon, you know, how casually the Thais will ask for money. You know, they won't hesitate. Well, you know, they're just the same if they're asking to borrow money, and it's a source of frustration to a lot of Westerners, you know, because we do tend to be seen as kind of having bottomless pockets. You know, they either see us here when we're on a 2-week holiday and we're just spending all the money that, you know, we might have worked all year to earn, or they see people retired who don't seem to be working. And so, you know, like, I think it can be frustrating to foreigners because they get fed up as being seen as a source of cash. But one lesson I learned quite early on, that I think a lot of foreigners fortunately aren't in a position to ever experience, and that was, I was out here once in 1989, and I met a girl, and you know, we travelled around together. You know, I took her down to Koh Samui and up to Chiang Mai, and these are the days long before kind of international ATM cards. You know, if you needed money sent across, it could take anything from 2 days to 2 weeks to arrive, and I ran out of money, and I had about 2 days left of a 2-week holiday. And I remember thinking, oh, well, that's it, you know, I'm just going to be spending all my time in the guest house, you know, like watching VHS tapes of Rambo. You know, I thought, that's it. And I thought, well, you know, I can't, you know, we've got no money, I can't, you know, we can't go out anywhere, the girl's going to disappear. But the girl went and withdrew her whole life savings, which in 1989 was £200. I mean, you know, it was a lot more money back then than it is now. And she had nothing, she didn't have my address or anything. That was all of her money. She just withdrew it, gave it to me just on blind faith that I would send it back to her, which of course they did, you know. And it was just, it's a very valuable lesson, you know, that actually if you're good to Thais, actually, and you're in the dumps, they will help you out. And I think it's just, as I said before, it's just a lesson that most Westerners are never in a position to, you know, to realise. And so, you know, they just sort of just see it as a kind of very one-sided process, which I guess from their perspective it is. But, you know, it was a valuable lesson. I'm glad I learnt it, you know, that it is a two-way thing. Now, one, it's quite quaint Thai tradition is that, you know, that they still follow up country, is that if you're a guest, if you go to their house, when it's time to eat, they'll bring all the food out and you are supposed to eat first, you know, and they won't eat until you're full, you know, and it can be, you know, us Westerners, we're not used to it, you know, so literally that they want you to sit there and eat everything, you know, until you're full before they even touch it, you know. And of course that makes most of us Westerners, you know, we feel a bit awkward just sitting there being the only person eating, you know. And you say, no, you eat too, and they, no, you eat first, you know. You know, that one takes a bit of getting used to. Now, Thais can be kind of very easygoing, you know, strict in some ways and very easygoing in others. I can remember going to get a driving license here a few years ago. I went to the test centre in Pattaya, you know, which is obviously it's quite a major centre. It's a pretty busy place and there's a lot of foreigners there. And I'm colourblind, you know, and one of the things you need before you can collect your driving licence is you need a colour test. So I was kind of dreading it, especially as it was one of the places where they use the colour dots, you know. I find that if they use like the traffic light system, it's easy to pick it out, but you know, you get different shades of red and green on the colour dot tests, and you know, they really throw me off. And of course there was about 20-30 people all doing it at the same time, and she just picked people at random, say what colour's this, and point at the colour, what colour's that. And then it was my turn, and I think you know, I had a hit and miss rate. It was about 50-50, and she was getting quite pissed off with me. She was, one point she shouted at me, "Don't tell me that's green again," you know. And she pointed to it, and I must have given her the wrong answer, and she failed me. I was the only person who failed, you know. And I thought, oh, here we go, that's it. But of course, being Thailand, I just went back the next day. The very same lady, you know, there's no way she didn't recognise me. And then I passed, you know. So welcome to Thailand. So if you're wondering where I am today, well, I'm back up Khao Nor. Come on, how many other vloggers do you know climb up mountains to give you their ramblings, you know? Show a bit of gratitude, like and subscribe, thank you.